Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. There's this incredibly common experience, almost a universal frustration that so many English learners share. It's this feeling, right? You've put in the hours, you've hit the books, you've studied the grammar, learned vocabulary lists, but when it comes time to actually speak, to truly express that complex thought or nuance you have in your head, it just doesn't come out the way you want. It feels clunky, or maybe you just freeze. It's like there's a wall between what you know and what you can actually do with the language. Have you ever felt that way? Because I sure have, and I hear it from so many people.
Absolutely. It's like this pervasive silent struggle, isn't it? People often come to me saying, I understand perfectly when I read or listen, but when I open my mouth, it's like my brain just empties out. Or I feel like a child trying to explain complex ideas. It's disheartening because they know they have the knowledge, but the bridge to fluent natural expression seems to be missing. It's a really common point of pain, and honestly, it's not their fault. There are some really hidden reasons this happens, and once we uncover them, it becomes so much clearer how to fix it.
That's exactly it. Hidden reasons. It's not about lacking intelligence or effort, which is so what many people wrongly conclude about themselves. So let's dive right into it. What's one of the biggest culprits you see that stops people from truly expressing themselves even after years of study?
One of the absolute biggest, I'd say, is an over-reliance on explicit grammar rules and isolated vocabulary. Think about it. Traditional learning means memorizing conjugations, noun cases, verb tenses, and then separate lists of words. We learn subject, verb, object, and present perfect for past actions with present relevance. And yes, that knowledge is foundational. It's important. But the problem is it teaches us to analyze the language, not necessarily to use it spontaneously. When you're in a real conversation, your brain doesn't have time to consciously recall, okay, this is a past perfect progressive sentence, so I need to form it with had, been, ing. Native speakers don't think like that. They just speak. We need to move beyond simply knowing the rules to instinctively applying them, almost without thinking. It's the difference between knowing the rules of driving and actually driving a car naturally on the road. You can list every rule, but until you've practiced enough, it's clunky and slow.
That's such a powerful analogy, knowing the rules versus actually driving. So it sounds like we're treating language like a math problem to solve in our heads rather than a fluid tool for communication. What other hidden pitfalls do you see blocking that natural expression?
Another huge one is the lack of real-world active practice. Many learners spend hours consuming English, reading articles, watching movies, listening to podcasts, which is fantastic for comprehension and input. But they don't balance that with output. They don't speak, they don't write. Or when they do, it's often in very controlled environments, like classroom drills or exercises, where the stakes are low. Real conversation, real writing requires you to synthesize information, formulate thoughts on the fly, and adapt to unexpected turns. It's an active skill, like playing a sport. You can watch all the basketball games you want, understand every rule and strategy, but until you get on the court and actually dribble, shoot, and pass, you'll never truly play the game. Our brains need to practice retrieving words, structuring sentences, and connecting ideas under pressure. If you're not regularly engaging in actual communication, that bridge we talked about just doesn't get built.
That makes so much sense. It's like training a muscle. If you don't use it, it won't get stronger. So if we're not actively practicing, if we're stuck in our heads analyzing grammar, what else contributes to this feeling of being unable to express ourselves?
Fear, plain and simple. The fear of making mistakes, of sounding foolish, of being misunderstood. This fear often paralyzes learners. They have the words, they might even know the grammar, but the moment they try to form a sentence, that little voice of self-doubt creeps in. Is my pronunciation right? What if I use the wrong tense? Will they judge me? And this anxiety makes them default to simpler expressions, or they just stay silent, which then reinforces the idea that they can't express themselves. It's a vicious cycle. We're wired to avoid perceived threats, and for many, speaking a foreign language without absolute perfection feels like a threat to their self-image. Overcoming this isn't just about language. It's about building confidence and reframing what a mistake actually is.
Oh, that resonates so deeply. The fear of judgment is such a powerful barrier, isn't it? It can completely shut down communication. Beyond that, what about vocabulary acquisition? We spend so much time learning words, but does that always translate to expression?
Not always, and here's why. Ineffective vocabulary acquisition. Many learners are still stuck in the habit of memorizing individual words from lists, often with a direct translation to their native language. While this can build a passive vocabulary, it's not conducive to active use. When you learn happy and joyful and elated as separate entries, you might know their meanings, but you don't necessarily know how to use them naturally in a sentence, with what prepositions or in what context. You miss the collocations, the words that naturally go together, and the nuances. For example, you make a decision. You don't do a decision. You have a strong opinion, not make a strong opinion. Learning words in isolation means your brain has to work harder to assemble them correctly, rather than retrieving ready-made chunks of language. This slows down your ability to express yourself naturally.
That's a crucial distinction, learning individual words versus learning how they fit together naturally. It's like having all the bricks but not knowing the architectural blueprint. What other pitfalls contribute to this lack of fluidity in expression?
Another significant issue is over-reliance on direct translation. When you're constantly trying to translate your thoughts word for word from your native language into English, you're essentially forcing English to conform to the structure and idioms of your first language. This often results in sentences that sound awkward, natural, or even incorrect to a native speaker. Every language has its own unique way of structuring thoughts, expressing ideas, and conveying emotion. If you're always starting from your native language and trying to map it onto English, you're constantly fighting against the natural flow of the language. It's like trying to navigate a new city using a map from a different city. Some landmarks might match up, but the routes and connections will be all wrong. The goal should be to eventually think in English, to bypass that translation step entirely.
That's a big one, the think in English concept. It feels like such an advanced step, but you're right that direct translation creates so many unnatural constructions. And finally, what about the auditory aspects? How does neglecting those affect our ability to express ourselves?
Absolutely. Neglecting pronunciation, stress, and intonation is a huge factor. You can have perfect grammar and vocabulary, but if your pronunciation makes your words unclear, or your stress and intonation patterns are flat or unusual, it significantly impacts how effectively you communicate. English is a stress-timed language, meaning some syllables are emphasized more than others, and words have a certain rhythm. Intonation, the rise and fall of your voice, conveys meaning. It can turn a statement into a question or express sarcasm or surprise. If you speak English with the rhythm and intonation of your native language, it can make it harder for listeners to understand you, even if your individual words are correct. This can lead to frustration on both sides and, again, make you feel like you can't express yourself fully because you're constantly having to repeat or clarify.
Wow, so it's not just what we say, but how we say it. That covers a lot of ground: grammar analysis, lack of practice, fear, isolated vocabulary, translation, and then pronunciation and intonation. These are truly fundamental issues. So now that we've broken down these hidden reasons, let's pivot to the really exciting part. How do we fix them? Where do we start to build that bridge to truly expressive English?
Great question. Let's tackle them one by one with practical solutions. For the over-reliance on grammar rules and isolated words, the fix is to shift to contextual learning, focusing on phrases and chunks of language. Instead of learning make as a verb and decision as a noun separately, learn make a decision as one unit. Instead of memorizing individual prepositions, learn them as part of common phrases: interested in, good at, on the table. This is how children learn their native language. They don't learn grammar rules first. They absorb common phrases and patterns. By learning these ready-made chunks, your brain doesn't have to construct every sentence from scratch. It retrieves pre-assembled units, which dramatically speeds up your fluency and makes your English sound more natural. Start noticing these chunks in everything you read and listen to.
That's brilliant. Learning language in context as actual usable phrases. It sounds so much more efficient and natural. What about the lack of real-world practice? How do we get ourselves on the court?
For the lack of active practice, the solution is simple but requires consistency. Actively create opportunities for speaking and writing. And I mean daily. It doesn't have to be a grand conversation with a native speaker every time. Start small. Talk to yourself in English. Narrate your day. Describe what you see around you. Record yourself speaking on your phone and listen back. Join online communities or language exchange apps where you can chat with others. Write short journal entries, emails, or even social media posts in.
Welcome back to Language Unlocked, where we explore the fascinating journey of mastering English. Today, we're diving into a topic that I know resonates with so many of our listeners, that frustrating habit of translating word by word in your head. It's a common approach, almost instinctive when you're learning a new language, right? But what if I told you it's actually one of the biggest roadblocks to fluency? Speaker 2, you've seen this happen countless times, both in your own learning and with others you've coached. Can you unpack this for us? Why does this seemingly logical strategy actually slow us down so much?
Absolutely, Speaker One. It's a classic trap, and honestly, almost every learner falls into it at some point. The reason it feels logical is that it's how we initially build our vocabulary. We connect a new English word to a known word in our native language. That's fine for isolated words. But when you apply that same process to entire sentences, especially in real-time conversation or while reading, it completely jams up your mental gears. Think about it. Your brain is trying to do two things at once. First, it's decoding the English sentence word by word. Then it's translating each of those words into your first language. After that, it has to reassemble those translated words into a coherent thought in your native tongue. Only then does it try to understand the meaning. It's an incredibly inefficient multi-step process. By the time you finish that mental gymnastics routine, the conversation has moved on or you've lost the thread of what you were reading. It creates this huge delay, a bottleneck that prevents natural, fluid understanding. You feel stuck, constantly playing catch-up, and it makes you doubt your abilities even when you have a decent vocabulary.
Wow, when you lay it out like that, it sounds exhausting just to think about. And I can totally picture listeners nodding along, having experienced that exact feeling. So it's not just about speed then. It's also about missing the nuances, isn't it? Because languages aren't just collections of words. They're expressions of culture and unique ways of thinking. Can you give us some examples where word-by-word translation really falls apart and leads to misunderstandings or just plain awkwardness?
You've hit the nail on the head, Speaker One. It's not just about speed, it's profoundly about meaning and nuance. Imagine trying to translate an idiom like, it's raining cats and dogs, literally. You'd get something nonsensical like, gatos y perros están cayendo del cielo. Or consider a phrasal verb, which English is absolutely full of. Take look up. If you translate look and up separately, you might think it means to gaze towards the sky. But in context, it often means to search for information, as in look up a word in the dictionary. The individual words don't carry the meaning, the combination does. Another great example is how prepositions work. In English, we wait for someone. But in many other languages, you might just wait someone or wait to someone. A word-by-word translation of wait for would be clunky and incorrect. Or even simple expressions like, how are you doing? A direct translation might be, ¿Cómo estás haciendo? Which doesn't really work. What we mean is, how are you feeling? How's life going? The literal translation simply fails to capture the intended message. These are just everyday examples, but they pile up and create a huge barrier. Learners end up sounding unnatural, even if their grammar is technically perfect, because they're forcing their native language's structure and thought process onto English.
That makes so much sense. It really highlights how much we rely on context and these little linguistic shortcuts. So, if word by word is a dead end, how do we pivot? What's the secret to breaking free from that habit and genuinely starting to think in English?
The secret, if you can call it that, is less about a magic trick and more about a fundamental shift in mindset and practice. It's about consciously training your brain to bypass that translation step entirely. The core idea is to connect the English word or phrase directly to the concept or image it represents, rather than going through your native language as an intermediary. Think of it like this. When you hear the word apple in English, do you first think manzana in Spanish or pomme in French, and then picture the fruit? Or do you just immediately picture a red, round, crunchy apple? The goal is to get to that immediate connection for all English expressions. One powerful way to start this shift is through immersive exposure. Surround yourself with English as much as humanly possible. Listen to podcasts, watch TV shows, read books, articles, even social media posts. Not actively trying to translate every single word, but trying to grasp the overall meaning. Don't panic if you don't understand everything. Focus on the gist, on the context. Your brain is incredibly powerful. It will start to build those direct connections unconsciously if you give it enough raw English input. It's like building new neural pathways, you know? The more you force yourself to just be in English, the faster those pathways form.
That's a fantastic analogy, building new neural pathways. But for someone who's been relying on translation for years, that can feel like a huge leap. It's almost like learning to walk again, but in a different way. Are there any more structured, practical exercises or daily habits that listeners can adopt to actively foster this thinking in English mindset?
Absolutely. There are very concrete things you can do. First, active listening without translating. When you listen to a podcast or watch a show, pause if you hear a phrase you don't understand. Instead of immediately going to your native language dictionary, try to infer its meaning from the surrounding context. If you still can't get it, look up the phrase, not just the individual words, in an English dictionary or an online resource that gives example sentences. This forces your brain to stay in English. Second, shadowing. This is where you listen to a native speaker and immediately try to mimic what they say, almost like an echo. You're not focusing on grammar rules, you're internalizing rhythm, intonation, and how words flow together naturally. It trains your mouth and your brain to produce English sounds and patterns without processing them through another language. Third, describe your environment in English. As you go about your day, internally narrate what you're seeing, doing, and thinking in simple English sentences. I am making coffee. The water is boiling. I need to add sugar. This low-pressure practice helps build fluency in everyday thoughts. Fourth, use flashcards creatively. Instead of writing an English word on one side and its native language equivalent on the other, try using an English definition, a picture, or an example sentence. This reinforces the direct connection. And finally, and this is crucial, embrace imperfection and persistence. You will make mistakes. You won't always understand everything immediately. That's okay. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. The more you push through that initial discomfort, the more your brain adapts, and the faster you'll start processing English directly, feeling that wonderful liberation from the translation trap. It's a journey, not a destination, but every little step counts.
That's incredibly practical and empowering advice. It really comes down to consistently challenging your brain to work differently. I love the idea of narrating your day in English. It's such a simple yet powerful way to integrate the language into your daily life. It sounds like the payoff is huge, moving from that slow, cumbersome translation process to a much more intuitive and joyful experience of communication.
It truly is liberating, Speaker One. Once you make that shift, the world of English opens up in a way that's impossible when you're constantly translating. You start to understand jokes, catch subtle nuances, appreciate wordplay, and connect with people on a deeper level because you're not filtering everything through another language. Conversations become effortless, reading becomes enjoyable, and suddenly you're not just learning English, you're living in English. Your confidence soars and the frustration dissipates, replaced by a genuine sense of accomplishment and fluency. It's not just about speaking faster, it's about thinking faster, feeling more connected, and truly making the language your own. It takes time and effort, but the rewards are absolutely immense.
That's a powerful vision and a truly inspiring one for anyone on their English learning journey. Thank you, Speaker 2, for shedding such clear light on this common challenge and for providing such actionable strategies for overcoming it. To all our listeners, we hope today's discussion encourages you to take that courageous step away from word by word translation and toward a more immersive, direct understanding of English. Keep practicing, keep challenging yourselves, and remember, every effort brings you closer to that incredible feeling of fluency. Join us next time on Language Unlocked. Welcome back to Everyday Stories, the show where we dive deep into the fascinating ways people navigate life's big challenges with simple, often overlooked solutions. Today, we're tackling something that I know weighs heavily on so many of our listeners: learning English. You know, that persistent feeling that you just don't have enough time, that you need extra hours, maybe even a whole other day in the week just to make progress. It's a common struggle, right? We hear it all the time. People feel guilty, they feel overwhelmed, and honestly, they often just give up because the mountain feels too high to climb. But what if I told you that you don't actually need to carve out huge, dedicated blocks of time? What if learning English could simply fit? Our guest today, a language learning enthusiast and expert, is here to show us how to integrate English naturally into your everyday life in these small, incredibly powerful moments that you might not even realize are opportunities. It's not about intensity, it's about consistency, about weaving it into the fabric of your day. I'm really excited about this conversation because it flips the traditional learning model on its head. So, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here and chat about this because honestly, it's a game changer for so many people. You hit the nail on the head. That feeling of overwhelm, that constant guilt of, I should be studying more, it's a huge barrier. I mean, who really has an extra hour or two every single day, after work, after family, after everything else life throws at us, to sit down with textbooks and flashcards? Most people don't. And when they try to force it, they burn out, they get frustrated, they associate English learning with stress, which is the absolute opposite of what we want. Learning should be engaging, even fun. My whole philosophy is built around the idea that consistent, tiny efforts are far more effective than sporadic, massive ones. Think about it like a river. A river carves canyons not by one sudden, huge flood, but by the relentless, everyday flow of water. Those small drops, day in and day out, they accumulate, they shape, they transform. And that's exactly how we can approach English. It's about identifying those hidden micro moments throughout your day, those little pockets of time that are often wasted, and just sprinkling in a bit of English.
I love that analogy, the river carving the canyon. It makes so much sense because it takes away that immediate pressure. It shifts the focus from how much time do I need to how can I make this a part of my flow? So let's get really practical here. For someone who's listening right now, maybe they're stuck in traffic or they're doing the dishes or they're just trying to figure out how to start their day differently. What is some of those first steps? Where can we begin to identify these micro moments and actually make them productive for English learning without it feeling like yet another chore added to an already packed schedule?
Absolutely. Let's break it down because it's simpler than people often imagine. The key is to piggyback English onto habits you already have. You're not creating a new habit from scratch. You're just slightly tweaking an existing one. Let's start with the morning, for instance. Most people wake up, maybe grab coffee, scroll on their phone, or listen to the news. That's a gold mine. Instead of scrolling through social media in your native language, switch it up. Maybe follow a few English news outlets or an English-speaking influencer who talks about topics you genuinely enjoy. Instead of your local morning radio, put on an English podcast. Even if you only catch 50% of it, your ears are tuning in, your brain is processing. You could even just pick an English song you love and really pay attention to the lyrics, look up a few words you don't know. It's not a deep dive, it's a dip. Another brilliant morning hack, and this one sounds simple but is incredibly powerful, is what I call internal narration. As you're getting ready, brushing your teeth, making breakfast, just narrate what you're doing in English in your head. I'm brushing my teeth now. I need to make some coffee. I'm pouring the water. It forces you to access vocabulary and sentence structures without any pressure.
That internal narration is such a clever idea. It's literally turning your internal monologue into a language lesson. I never thought of it that way. And the idea of leveraging existing habits like morning news or social media makes it feel so much less daunting. It's not add English to my morning routine, it's make my morning routine slightly more English. That's a huge psychological shift. Okay, so we've got the mornings covered. What about later in the day when we're perhaps commuting or taking a break at work or even just doing mundane tasks around the house?
Exactly. It's about integration, not addition. So let's talk about the commute, which for many is a significant chunk of time. This is prime podcast time. Find podcasts on topics you're passionate about, whether it's history, true crime, personal development, whatever, but in English. There are also fantastic language learning podcasts specifically designed for different levels. Audiobooks are another excellent option. Start with something simple, maybe a young adult novel, and gradually move up. You don't have to understand every single word. Just grasp the general gist. The exposure is what matters. During work breaks, instead of just checking your phone aimlessly, dedicate 5 minutes. Maybe you use a flashcard app like Enki or Quizlet for vocabulary review, or read a short English article from a news site you follow. Even just changing your phone's language settings to English can provide constant, subtle exposure to new words and phrases in a context you already understand. It's like a mini language immersion experience baked right into your daily tech use. And when you're doing chores, washing dishes, cleaning, folding laundry, again, this is a perfect opportunity for background listening. Put on that podcast, that audiobook, or even an English-speaking YouTube channel about something you find interesting. The point is your hands are busy, but your mind is free to absorb.
This is brilliant, honestly. I'm already thinking about all the little moments I could be utilizing. The phone language setting is so simple but so effective. And the idea of aligning English content with your actual interests, like true crime podcasts or clicking channels, makes it less about studying and more about enjoying life in English. It really makes it feel less like a chore and more like a natural extension of who you are and what you already love to do. But what about when we're unwinding? After a long day, people just want to relax. How can we fit English into that downtime without it feeling like more work?
You've hit on a crucial point there. Downtime has to feel like downtime, otherwise you'll resist it. The trick here is to swap out your usual entertainment for English alternatives, gradually. If you love watching TV shows or movies, start watching them in English with English subtitles. Once you get comfortable, try watching without subtitles or with subtitles in your native language so you can follow the plot but still hear the English. You'd be surprised how quickly your comprehension improves. Gaming is another huge one. If you play video games, switch the language settings to English. You'll pick up so much vocabulary related to actions, commands, and scenarios just by playing. Even listening to music. Instead of just enjoying the melody, really listen to the lyrics, look them up, sing along. It's a fantastic way to improve pronunciation and natural phrasing. Before bed, if you enjoy reading, pick up an English novel or even just a short story. Start with something easy, maybe a children's book or a graded reader. The goal isn't to read a classic novel every night, it's just to engage for 10 to 15 minutes. Or going back to that internal narration, maybe you just mentally recap your day in English. Today I did X, Y, and Z. Tomorrow I need to remember to do A, B, and C. This makes it a seamless part of your winding down routine. It's about making English the default, not the exception in your leisure.
I'm genuinely feeling inspired right now. It really takes away that all or nothing mentality, which is such a common trap. The idea that every interaction, every piece of content, every moment can be a tiny learning opportunity is incredibly empowering. It really makes it feel less like a struggle and more like an organic part of living. But I can imagine some listeners thinking, this sounds great, but how do I actually start? What's the first thing I should do tomorrow to implement this without feeling overwhelmed by all these amazing suggestions? Like, if they could pick just one thing, what would you say is the most accessible entry point to this everyday English philosophy?
That's a fantastic question, and it's important to start small to avoid that overwhelm. If I had to pick just one thing to kick off this journey, I would say identify one existing daily habit that is currently empty of English and infuse it with just 5 minutes of English content that you genuinely enjoy. For example, if you always scroll social media with your morning coffee, commit to following 3 English accounts related to your hobbies. If you commute, commit to listening to one English song and looking up 2 words. If you watch TV in the evening, try one episode of a show you already love, but with English audio and English subtitles. Don't try to do everything at once. Pick one thing,
make it enjoyable, and make it consistent for a week. Once that feels natural, then you can slowly layer in another micro moment. The goal is to build momentum and prove to yourself that English learning isn't a massive undertaking, but a series of small, manageable, and even enjoyable adjustments. It's about changing your mindset from "I need to study" to "I'm living my life and English is just part of it now." And trust me, those small drops will indeed carve a canyon of fluency over time. It's not magic, it's just consistent, intentional living.
That's such a comforting and actionable piece of advice. Start small, make it enjoyable, and be consistent. It really boils down to proving to yourself that English can be a natural, integrated part of your day, not a separate, burdensome task. Thank you so much for sharing these incredible insights and practical strategies. I think our listeners will feel a huge sense of relief and motivation after hearing this. It really redefines what learning English means. Instead of a daunting mountain, it's just about changing the direction of the river you're already in. Thank you for being with us today.
My absolute pleasure. Remember, every little bit truly does count. You've got this.